Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar panel on supply chain segmentation, the secret to great supply chain design. My name is Denny Bloem, and I'll be the moderator of this panel today. Today with me, I have Sandeep Walia and Thomas Doyle. We'll get to their introductions in a minute. Today we're talking about supply chain segmentation being one of the drivers for supply chain strategy, supply chain design, and in the end, how can segmentation improve your bottom line by both reducing costs and improve sales? As I mentioned before, I have two great panelists with me. We'll introduce ourselves shortly. So my name is Denny Bloem. I'm a panelist. Of course, I'm a panelist. I'm a consultancy manager at Slimstock, Canada. I lead our delivery team, including our new business onboarding and our aftermarket professional services. Today with me, I have Sandeep Walia, who is a Chief Transformation Officer at Slimstock, Middle East and Africa. Welcome, Sandeep. Very happy to have you here. Could you give us a minute and introduce yourself, and why are you on this panel today?
Thanks, Danny. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Sandeep. I'm based here in Dubai. That's why you see the other two gentlemen in broad daylight, and me, you see the night shoes. 18 years in supply chain, out of which 15 on the industry side with L'Oreal, LVMH Group, and Adidas, and the other 3 years on the software side with Bloem first, and now since a year with Slimstock. Had the opportunity to see firsthand the added value of having a segmented, differentiated supply chain strategies, and how it can contribute directly to your financial performance. And I hope we'll be able to discuss on that today during the session.
All right, thanks, Sandeep. Next off to Thomas Doyle, who's a senior consultant at Slimstock Canada. Thomas, can you take a minute to introduce yourself and tell us, why are you a panelist on this topic?
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, all across the world, depending what time zone. I'm Thomas Doyle. As Danny mentioned, I'm a senior consultant here at Slimstock Canada. I'm actually part of Danny's team. I'm actually supporting and leading the aftermarket and continuous improvement division of Slimstock Canada. So a little bit of background about myself. Originally, I'm an industrial engineer by trade, with supply chain optimization background, both academically and practically and professionally. What I'd like to bring to you guys today is really the value add of segmentation. I think it's a topic that really sometimes goes under the radar for our customers here at Slimstock. I'm really excited to show the value add, of course, that this particular topic will provide your business, as I've done similar exercises with our existing customer base here in Canada. So very much looking forward to sharing my insights and hopefully provide a good explanation and convincing for those on the call of exploring the opportunities of segmentation.
All right, thanks, Thomas. So before we dive into the content, I want to give you a bit of a background of who Slimstock is for any of you that do not know us. So basically, Slimstock is a global provider of inventory management solutions with many offices across the world. I think we have offices in about 26 countries. We have customers in over 50 countries. There's over 1,000 customers on board with us to date. We do over 130 projects in inventory management every year, and that includes both new business, so new customer onboarding, but also our professional services, where we help companies implementing, for example, segmentation to help drive continuous improvement. And we pride ourselves on a 96% customer retention rate. So I would say we're a customer intimate company. We like to work with our customers to drive that improvement. So we're a company that has a software package which is called Slim4, and basically, the goal of our tool is to create a demand plan and a supply plan, and that all comes from a lot of rules around inventory, and segmentation is definitely one of the drivers of business rules when it comes to inventory. Hence why we want to talk with you today about such segmentation. So the solution encompasses a lot of different modules. So we have forecasting, inventory management, assortment, there's promotion management, shelf life, sales and operations planning, multi-location management, and order optimization or supply planning. There's modules that help support segmentation, such as our ABC, service level differentiation, as some of you might be aware. The concept of segmentation, what are variables you pick, what's your end goal, those are things we're going to help today, or going to talk about today. So that being said, I want to dive into what's the need of segmentation in today's world. So we're living in an age where we see many disruptions. Disruptions are set to be the new normal, and I think in that world of disruption, we have both structural, so changes that occur and it will stick around. You can look at VR with the Great Resignation. There's a focus on sustainability. We also have transient changes, that disruptions that will hopefully not last going forward. So there's inflation. There's a war going on in Ukraine, and there's a global energy crisis. So now, Sandeep, to you, how do you think, from your perspective, how will segmentation help deal with that? There's an increased or rapid changes in the way we do business, the way new technologies come up, but there's also an increase in those really transient disruptions. How can segmentation help a business with that?
I think we have to maybe take a step back and first understand the consequences of these disruptions. So if we only focus on the transient ones that you see here, inflation, the energy prices, the impact of war in Ukraine, so it has created a lot of pressure on consumers, and their spending behavior has changed. And as a result, businesses, they are facing a kind of double whammy. They are losing on the top line, but at the same time, their costs are out of control. Which means they have top line issues, they have cost issues, and their margins are taking a hit. So in that kind of scenario, resource allocation becomes very critical. How do you make sure that the capital that you have, you allocate it efficiently, so that you can get best result or return on that capital, right? And inventory is nothing but your working capital in action. And segmentation basically helps you decide what kind of service levels you want to provide for different product categories, for different locations in your network, at what kind of cost you can allow those service levels, and what is the inventory that you need to carry to provide those service levels. So segmentation basically helps in identifying which products in your portfolio they need premium service versus which products they need, let's say, low cost. Which locations in your network, if you are an omni-channel player, need a premium service versus which locations they can be okay with the medium level of service. So this segmentation basically allows you to have to run your supply chain at multiple speeds, have a differentiated service level strategy, and at the same time allocate your resources wisely, so that you can get, let's say, a maximum profitability from your resource allocation. So segmentation is, I would say, the need of the hour if we have to manage these structural and transient changes. And also, if you are in fashion industry, in apparel and footwear, sustainability and circularity is important. And here also consumers have a very strong expectations from people, from the brands in the industry, and their segmentation also helps. Which categories we need to nearshore versus the categories that we can keep offshore, so that we reduce the carbon footprint or eco impact of our business.
Thanks, very elaborate answer. Thanks for that. Thomas, now to you. So some of these disruptions we've seen come up over the last year. What have you seen in the market? Like, how have these disruptions affected the customers and clients that you've been working with?
Yeah, sure. Be happy to answer that question. So first, I'll start by mentioning that, you know, as it was portrayed by both Sandeep and Danny, that navigating through this new normal of uncertainty certainly has been a challenging journey for sure for our customers, especially in the past year with all these transient and structural changes that we've been facing. So and really the decision on what direction to go next has never been more elusive, right? You know, because we're now throwing out our proactive business processes and now moving to a more reactive business process, right? So with the cost of goods increasing at record rates, ourselves as consumers are feeling the pinch, but also our customers here at Slimstock are feeling the pinch as well, which is causing a shift, as I mentioned, in those proactive day-to-day business processes because they're no longer working. So now making that shift to a more reactive way of working, in a lot of our cases, I've found a lot of our customers that came up to myself and said, you know, how can we reduce costs, right? The cost of goods are skyrocketing. How can we ensure that we maintain, you know, the level of service that we want to be able to provide our customers while minimizing costs? A lot of our customers are saying, you know what, maybe we should just take a one-size-fits-all approach and reduce all of our service levels to reduce our costs. Sure, that is a way to you know, to reduce your costs and navigate through this phenomenon, but is it the only way? And my answer is no. There is this concept of segmentation, which we'll be describing today together, that we can take a more proactive and more evidence-driven approach to really segment and decide what sort of supply chain strategies we want to adopt based on different segmentation dimensions, which we'll go through. So yeah, so as I mentioned, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. We are able to take a more evidence-driven approach to be able to maintain that level of service you'd like to provide your customers, as well as you know, protecting our bottom line.
Thanks for that, Thomas. So we've kind of established why or how disruptions affect businesses. We need to lower cost in order to actually be able to deal with them. Segmentation is one of the answers to that problem. So if we know that, I think there's more to segmentation, right? It's not only about dealing with disruptions. It's I think, you know, if we're in a competitive environment, we should always try to outcompete our nearest competitors. We need to outcompete future competitors. And so when we're designing segmentation, taking an end goal in mind, what is the main variable that, you know, a segmentation should really respond? And maybe for Sandeep, what are, you know, typical end goals of segmentation if we don't look at it from a disruption perspective, but from a wider business perspective? And how do you really align it with your overall company strategy?
I think the best way to put that into action is to have clear understanding of how my supply chain strategy can contribute to my business strategy, right? So if your customer value proposition is around customer experience, availability, or exclusivity, scarcity, or if you as a business is focused more on operational excellence or cash flow efficiencies, it all depends what you want to achieve as an organization, where the focus is. And the best way to put that into action is have it modeled around the supply chain triangle, right? A supply chain strategy that is designed to basically achieve the business strategy. We often talk in terms of three sides of supply chain triangle being service, cost, and cash, right? Working capital. So the role of any supply chain is to provide service to the business, right? That is the raison d'etre, that is the reason to be, because service translates into availability, and it generally translates into a revenue, right? No matter how we measure our service, whether it is on-shelf availability or OTIF or fill rates, in the end, it is always linked with how you perform as a business. But that service comes at a cost, because to source the products, to produce the products, to move the products, distribute the products, there are costs that are associated, and also to store those products, right? The way to provide that service is through having inventory. It is your cash that is there in your inventory. So the segmentation basically helps supply chain to align its strategy with the business, right? To deliver a business strategy by focusing on the products or the locations where we can have maximum impact, where we can generate maximum profitability. So in this example, if on my product catalog, I can split the service that I provide into, let's say, premium, responsive, and cost-conscious brackets, then I'll be able to better allocate the resources that I have at my disposal. I'll be able to have control on the costs, have a control on my cash allocation, and at the same time, have enough availability on the products that matter to provide the service that business expects from me. So a clear example, on my A-class products, I can afford to have a premium service, but on my C-class, I can afford to have a cost-conscious strategy. What happens generally is, and as Thomas mentioned a while ago, businesses, they tend to go in with a one-size-fits-all approach, where they tend to basically allocate the resources disproportionately and not according to the contribution of a product family or a location to the top line and the bottom line.
Thanks, Sandeep. Thomas, is there anything you'd like to add, something that you've seen are typical goals of companies there where you have implemented segmentation?
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, so reflecting on the past year, really it's that cost-conscious kind of lower quadrant, in the graph we see on the slide that a lot of our customers are trying to adopt currently because of the uncertainty and because of the ongoing increasing in cost of goods, right? But it's not just a cost-conscious, right? It depends on your business strategy, to Sandeep's point, right? Depending on the different product group, or depending on the business strategy that you're looking to adopt, it's not just a cost-conscious one size fits all. You can be more responsive by allocating additional resources from a more responsive approach. And if you want to go just as high as, always ensuring that you're able to serve your customer orders, obviously that comes with a cost as well. But just, again, reflecting back on the past year, a lot of our customers, as I mentioned, are really looking for that cost-conscious approach. And whenever there's a more kind of stable, predictable future, transitioning into more of a responsive kind of supply chain design from a segmentation perspective, I think is something that's going to be, our customers are going to be looking to explore.
Thanks. So we've established really an end goal of segmentation, improving your bottom line by treating different parts of your supply chain different compared to other parts of your supply chain, and it can really depend on a different product type, that can depend on a different revenue contribution. So if we talk about different segmentation dimensions, there's a lot of different segmentations that can support individual pillars of the business, and that can have different sort of sub goals to support a specific department, to support a different sort of workload contribution. Thomas, could you kind of go in and explain what sort of different types of segmentation you've seen, what goals they can support, and how can they be important in improving that service, cost, sure, and cash spend?
Of course. Yeah, so again, just kind of echoing Sandeep's explanation in the previous slide. Again, we're talking about this one size fits all, right? And this slide absolutely kind of defeats that claim, right? Because we have different dimensions of segmentation, each dimension of segmentation warrants a different approach and different strategy. So just a quick kind of overview of these dimensions. First, we'll look at supplier. So very crucial to segment based on supplier, because you know, in a lot of cases, there's specific contractual agreements that you have with your source of supply, right? It could be ordering frequency, volume, pricing. Also, if it's a single or multiple source of supply, you know, that also warrants a different strategy, right? So if you have multiple suppliers that are sourcing the same product, it would warrant a different strategy than a single source of supply, right? And this is also very crucial in order to ensure you maintain a desirable level of service downstream to your customers, right? So next we have products. Product is actually one of the most common dimensions, and what I mean by that is, for those on the call familiar with ABC and service level differentiation, in some aspect that actually is a level of segmentation. If we're looking at product characteristics, whether it be, you know, revenue, volume, frequency of ordering, volatility as well, you know, how fluctuating has your sales history been, and forecastability as well. Is there sufficient demand history to have, you know, a reliable forecast? All these play a very important role in deciding, you know, what sort of strategy you would like to deploy. This will also help reduce the costs associated with maintaining an optimal supply chain design with heightened levels of service, right? Maybe you might want to allocate additional levels of service to lower cost items. You know, these are all different considerations which all, you know, stem from the concept of segmentation. Next, we want to you know, look at market. So again, it depends. Are you striving to gain market share, or are you looking to maintain market share? And so, depending on your answer, in order to penetrate a new market, you know, an initial investment will be required to help facilitate that process into the market, right? So there's going to be additional costs associated with that particular dimension of segmentation in order to gain that market share and make a presence in the market. Next, we have is channels. So depending on the distribution channel type, it will dictate what segmentation strategy you would be looking to deploy, whether it be wholesale, retail, or the others. Also, the frequency and mode of delivery will also warrant consideration when you're segmenting and employing a particular strategy. For example, retail channels, as they're serving the end consumer, could benefit from ensuring consistent stock availability, which would of course incur a cost, but also, you know, you'll be able to serve those customers because as a retailer, yeah, you are serving the end consumer. Another example, shorter lead times to your customer allows you to respond quicker to fluctuations, so you can be more reactive with little risk. But let's say conversely, we have longer lead times. Let's say they're shipping containers, you know, and also with the concept of highly volatile sales history, that you know, that would incur a huge cost to maintain that certain level of service to your downstream customers. And lastly, coming back to customers. So similar to supplier, actually, some customers might have contractual requirements that warrant a specific segmentation strategy, whether there's an agreed upon purchasing volume, price, frequency, etc. You also might want to have a different strategy to make your biggest customers happy, right? You might want to ensure that you have stock readily available all the time to ensure that you know, you maintain your cash flow and grow your cash flow. Also, other generational differences between customers could be considered as well. Let's say, for example, a younger generation might have different availability expectations with their, you know, with whatever they're purchasing, more than refined generations, I guess. So it's, again, all these things are elements that need to be considered when you're, you know, attempting to, you know, kind of deploy segmentation within your supply chain.
All right, thanks for that. So there's a lot of different types of segmentation. I don't suggest the audience to go ahead and implement all of them at once. I think we have to be very careful about the ones we use, because having too many different type of segmentations will lead to an infinite amount of combinations of business strategy. Sandeep, a question to you. So if we look at supply chain planning specifically, you know, that's the field that we are in as Slimstock. what are the ones that we actually should have ownership of? Where we can be the leaders versus a contributor, versus some of them might be more important for sales or sourcing. What's your perspective on that?
I think some of the segmentation decisions in the businesses that have a direct impact on designing your supply chain strategy, they sit with the business. So I would say the customers, channels, and marketing, the markets is basically with your commercial functions, with your financial functions, where supply chain is more of a contributor. But when it comes to product and supplier segmentation, supply chain has a very active leading role to play. So to give you an example, let's say channel segmentation. The business may decide if you are into omni-channel retail that you have different store formats. The business decide that they need a certain service level in priority for the freestanding stores, flagship stores. But for the travel retail outlet, it can be different for XYZ reason, because maybe freestanding stores you have higher profitability, higher margins. Same thing when you look at customers. You have a certain online businesses, they decide to provide extra services to high CLTV customers. So if you have a higher customer lifetime value with the online player, they may offer you certain convenience, speed, and value-adding services as compared to a customer who has a regular or a low CLTV, right? So on the customer channel and the market side, supply chain plays more a role of a contributor and the one who executes the strategy. Whereas when it comes to product and supplier segmentation, supply chain can take the role of a leader, and then of course validate the proposals with the business side. To give you an example, when we do our let's say ABC, a lot of businesses they only focus on ABC by value or by volume and value. But we can also add margin. For example, how many of my A products in value are also A in margin. So you can have multi-dimension ABCs where you can slice and dice to any level of granularity to implement your strategy. For example, my A in value, A in volume, but C in margin does not deserve the same strategy as my A in volume, value, and margin.
Yeah, very, very good point. So now if we actually want to go through an elaborate example of a product segmentation. So what we see here is, there's a lot of different types. We can use different sort of axes. We can use different sort of criteria. We can do different or multiple dimensions. Can you really talk us through an example of segmentation for, let's say, demand planning, and what sort of different strategies do we decide on for each segments for the different quadrants that the segmentation yields?
Yeah, sure. So normally what happens in businesses, and I hope Thomas will share his experience as well on this one. Businesses or supply chain teams in the businesses, they do their ABC analysis, whether it is backward looking or forecast based. So they do their ABC XYZ analysis, but then they don't carry out the next step, which is set up a dedicated or differentiated strategy per classification. So here, let's say if we plot on a 2x2 scale volatility and value, your different ABC XYZs, and to make it a little bit more, let's say, desirable, your horses are your high value products that have low volatility, which means they basically run on their own and they can run for long. Your mad bulls are your high value products with high volatility, which means they need some kind of TLC. Your rabbits, they are highly volatile, but they don't add any value, so which can be your long tail, basically. And then your low volatility, low value products, which are your slow movers, right? So each and every quadrant or the products in these quadrants, they can have a dedicated demand planning strategy, which means if I'm talking about high value, low volatility, I can trust my stat forecasting if I cleansing the history properly. I can manage these products in my portfolio through low touch forecasting that can be purely system driven, and I can measure my performance through forecast error or forecast accuracy. Whereas when we are talking about mad bulls, they are volatile in nature. So we can only go to a certain extent by working on stat forecast. So these can be part of my demand review and more collaborative discussions with my marketing and trade marketing teams, so that we get that qualitative intelligence in the organization, and we do collaborating forecasting on that one, and we measure the forecast value add. Now, what generally happens in the organizations is we have the visibility on ABC, XYZ, but then we don't take this extra step to have a differentiated strategy for those products. And what happens is by focusing at the same time on rabbits and turtles, we kind of lose the focus on horses and mad bulls, and that creates also the problem on the products where we should definitely be capable of adding value.
Thanks for that. Thomas, before I go to you, I want to ask a question to the all the participants on this webinar today. I want to give you an opportunity to really ask the panel a question about how you would like to use segmentation. Tell us a bit more about the goals you want to achieve, and then we as a panel will have some time to actually brainstorm about those, about the variables, about the criteria that we're going to pick live here on this webinar. So it could be an exciting exercise. There's a section for questions, there's a chat section, and just submit your questions about segmentation there, and in a few minutes we'll try and go over them. We have a couple of examples ourselves as well, so hold tight. I'll submit this question to the chat as well, so you can reread it, and yeah, feel free to ask us anything about segmentation. All right, Thomas, back to you. If we talk about this segmentation, maybe what does this really achieve for a business, and what other sorts of segmentation have you seen add value?
Yeah, sure. So reflecting back on the supply chain triangle, in essence, it actually allows you to minimize the costs associated with maintaining the service that you desire to serve to your customers, right? Focusing on value-add items, to Sandeep's point, within your assortment will unleash additional revenue for less of a cost to your business. So that's kind of the entire goal here. And this actually example of this qualitative segmentation is, to Sandeep's point as well, starting from a standard ABC classification, taking one step further and segmenting based on these 4 quadrants is actually will unleash an incredible amount of value for your business. If we're focusing on, the lefternmost quadrants, so the horse and the turtle, right? To Sandy's point, you're trusting your stats from Slim4 as being a Slimstock employee. Trust the forecast that's being generated from Slim4, right? Low volatility, which indicates that it is a predictable item, would warrant you need to spend less time on enriching your forecast, right? But reflecting on some of our customers who have adopted something similar to this, is they have now allocated a lot more resources to be able to enrich their forecast for the bull and the rabbit scenarios, right? Let Slim4 and your statistical driven forecast, run the show for the lefternmost quadrants, and enriching your forecast for for the right. Any market considerations that might not necessarily be represented in the historical data will really help provide value add to your bottom line. and really help prioritize, where you want to spend your time when enriching your forecast. So this particular scenario is absolutely, it's a great example because, as I mentioned, this past year, I've had 2 or 3 customers who have come to us, as experts in the field and say, how can we get more, for the money we invest? And, applying this sort of strategy is not super intuitive, but it's something that is very much value add, and really helps you prioritize, where do you want to spend your time enriching your forecast and delivering value.
Thanks. We did get one question from the participants, so I'd actually like to bring that one up while I leave this slide open. So we have a segmentation of suppliers, and in the absence of measures for risk criticality, what would be a reasonable segmentation based on order value and volume only? Are we able to work with those criteria, or do you say maybe we actually should add those criteria? What are your thoughts?
I think if you go back to the supplier segmentation, you might see this strategic slash collaborative. The risk versus dependency. So you see those as dimensions, right? Reliability versus time to market. Risk is very important, especially if you are an international business and you have long-term horizons. Risk is very important to manage upstream. So risk criticality, dependency on your supplier, or whether you have a key ingredient or raw material and you have multiple suppliers, then risk is not a factor. But if you have a key ingredient and you have only one supplier, then risk is huge. The best example, chip shortage. Why do we have chip shortage in automobile industry? Because automobile industry for many years was sourcing the chips from handful of suppliers that were based in Asia, right? So no or limited risk management, and we find ourselves in this situation. So I would say that depending on what your supplier footprint is, supplier base is, it is important to segment them into strategic versus collaborative or operational suppliers, or high risk versus low risk, or how dependent we are on those suppliers. And then the other factor is reliability. I may have a strategic supplier who is not delivering the reliability levels that I expect from them. So it all goes hand in hand, strategic versus, let's say, collaborative versus operational, low risk versus high risk, or no risk, and at the same time, high reliability versus medium and low reliability. Then once I have that understanding of my supplier footprint, and I can segment them, then I can set up my supply chain strategy accordingly from at least upstream standpoint.
Yeah, so I think, as Sandeep mentioned, risk is actually, especially in supplier segmentation, one of the more important ones. If you're familiar with Krollich sourcing matrix, there's always the volume and order value and volume, which in this question were available, that helps you determine strategic suppliers from a perspective of volume. But there's always the risk factor. What are products that are critical to my business that without it I won't be able to run, and it could even be a low value product, just something that makes a product that for you is relatively cheap, but there might be only 1 or 2 suppliers available that can actually put it out there. Thomas, any thoughts from your end?
I may, if I may add, before we go to Thomas, I think a lot of businesses out there, especially the big organizations, they don't stop at tier 1. They go all the way back to tier 2 and tier 3, so that they have the complete visibility of risk, which means if I'm comfortable with the fact that my tier 1 supplier, I have visibility on my tier 1 supplier, but then I have no clue of his own upstream network, then I may expose myself to risk. So a lot of businesses out there, they basically try to have clear understanding and visibility of risk, at tier 2 and tier 3 levels as well.
Thanks. Thomas, any additional comments or thoughts?
Yeah, excuse me. Just a quick one. I think, as I mentioned, going over these dimensions is really, yeah, and I think Sandeep kind of already actually reiterated that point. Is it a single source of supply or multiple sources of supply, right? That's really what you need to. The different scenario will dictate, you know, what segmentation strategy you will take, right? If it's a single source of supply, obviously investing more, ensuring that you have product readily available to service your downstream customers, absolutely. But if you have multiple sources of supply, then taking a different approach would be beneficial. That's really the only point I have to make there.
All right, thanks. I hope that answered your question, Mohammed. We have one more actually that just came in. How could an organization's logistics be influenced by segmentations? Or maybe if I rephrase that a little bit, we want to do a segmentation that will help our logistics, so the actual physical distribution or transportation. Thomas, what are criteria that you would use in your segmentation to support logistics versus, we just did demand planning, but what could be different in terms of, you know, what you pick as the basis of that segmentation?
Yeah, okay, so let's see here, brainstorming on the fly. So really the elements that I would take into consideration to kind of, from a logistical standpoint, is really first looking at your distribution channels as well, right? You know, is reviewing your transportation modes as well. Is it, you know, is it short lead time items with relatively low variability in lead time and consistency in that lead time? Or is it really long lead times, which highly variable lead times, right? Those are two elements really that I think would warrant different strategies to really have an optimal kind of segmentation strategy to really facilitate a logistical side of the business. That's my 2 cents worth. Maybe I'll give it over to Sandeep now, and yeah, that would be my first approach when I'm setting up.
I think to add on to what Thomas mentioned, from logistics point of view, segmentation already helps in setting up your warehousing strategy, right? Your storage strategy, depending on the rate of sale of the product, the ease of picking of the product. It is possible to segment your catalog. Value-added services, for example, if you are into apparel and footwear industry, there are certain value-adding services you can provide in the warehouse, so that you don't have to do that in the back room of the shop, like tagging and labeling. So you can and you don't have to do it for entire product catalog. You can say, okay, for all these high rate of sale items or high value items, I'll be doing these value-added services in the warehouse. Then for your distribution network, whether it is warehouse to store or warehouse to your other department stores or partners, you can have replenishment frequencies, you can have different transport modes. So there are certain players, for example, when I was living in Paris, the deliveries to the Paris stores, they were in EV fleet, whereas to the other cities, it was the normal fleet. So you can decide a lot of logistics related activities or strategies based on product segmentation or the combination of product and location.
Thanks, Sandeep. I'd like to actually add something myself, because what I think, what I've often seen in my career working with ABC segmentations, there's a difference in what you would pick as an ABC for demand planning. So we've just gone through, there's a value contribution, whether that's margin, revenue, COGS, and on the other hand, volatility that indicates, okay, how volatile is the item. If we want to do an ABC that supports, for example, our warehouse, warehouses is actually, I think, where when you Google ABC, that's what most of the articles, most of the books will tell you about. I can use an ABC to design the layout of my warehouse. I put the products that I pick often closer to the outbound area than the products that are, you know, sea movers. We should put those high up on shelves because we're not picking them that much. So It's easier to pick something that's, you know, at picking heights. You don't need to get there with a picking card. You don't need to go up. Nothing needs to be moved around in order to get it. So that means like there's a difference in those ABCs. So on one, we look at, you know, where do demand planners spend their time? Where do we manually forecast? On the other hand, we want to have our ABC picking as efficient as possible. So we're looking at order lines, so which is a measure of how often is it picked by somebody in the warehouse going outbound. So there's a definitely, you know, the difference in criteria is very important, because the order lines can support some sections, but it doesn't support demand planning, at least to a lesser extent than it would support a warehouse. So it's really, that's, you know, taking that end goal in mind, like what are you trying to optimize and what is that criteria that you're actually trying to optimize, and then you do a segmentation based on that. We have one more question from Reggie. So if we're looking at buy versus make, you know, local versus overseas, what would you want to consider other than just costs?
I think if it is buy versus make or local versus overseas, more than the cost, I would look at the reliability or risk, because I may get a lower cost, but how reliable is my supplier in fulfilling my requirements? And some businesses now, they are bringing in the sustainability angle, the ESG angle, where they want to make sure that their suppliers, they respect, they are clean on human rights, they don't have any child abuse scenarios. So there are a lot of things to take into account, especially if I'm offshoring it to certain parts of the world where they may have different standards. So along with the cost, reliability, risk, track record on human rights, the impact on sustainability, or the CO2 or the eco impact, and also the viability of the supplier. Is it a new supplier? Can help me scale as well, or it will disappear because they have financial problems? So there are a lot of things to take into account along with the cost, because I may get a very good price, but what is the guarantee that I don't expose myself to all these other factors that are very important for any business these days, especially when consumers are like making their buying choices, buying decisions based on these elements.
Thanks. Thomas, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and actually it kind of goes back to kind of our, actually we're on the slide, the right slide actually for this discussion is coming back to the supplier dimension. So again, and I guess kind of echoing to Sandeep's point is the risk element. Again, a single source versus multiple source, right? New supplier, is it a supplier that you know, that is local, or you know, or is it offshore? Those are elements that definitely should be at the forefront of a decision when you're considering segmentation. Is again, the consideration of risk and multiple versus single source of supply. So that would be my 2 cents worth for this particular question.
All right, thank you. We didn't get any more questions from the participants. So what I'd like to do, we set up a few examples, sort of, you know, fake questions we came up with in advance. I think there's still a few topics that, you know, out of that set that we haven't covered. So if we look at doing a product segmentation, on the left we see what are different criteria that we can pick, and I think we discussed a few already. We have value contribution, we have volume, we have volatility. There's a lot of other criteria that we could do to start our product segmentation. And now let's say we look at the bottom example. We're looking at assigning a certain amount of service to products. Sandeep, like, how would you approach this exercise? So let's say we want to optimize our service level with, you know, the lowest amount of cost. Like, what are considerations that you put into a segmentation like that?
I think what is important here to highlight is when we talk about A, B, C, X, Y, Z. AZ is my high value, high volatility product, right? So the fact that it is highly volatile, I cannot offer, I can, but if I decide to offer the same level as AX, which is 97%, this means I'll have to have more inventory, right? But the fact that this product is AZ, is highly volatile, I may have the cases where there is a lot of inventory, or the cases where there is not enough inventory. So it is better to have a segmented, differentiated approach in setting up your service strategy when we talk about AX, AY, AZ. At least in my experience, a lot of customers, they have this strategy where they don't take volatility into account. They say we want 97% on all the A's. But all the A's, they're not same. Some of them can be horses, other can be Mad Bulls, right? And the same thing for my C products. For my C X, I don't want to provide the same level of service, because by definition they are C, which means they are the last 5% of my turnover. So if for last 5% of my turnover, I'm providing the same service as the first 80 or first 95, then it doesn't make any sense, right? So having this clear differentiated service level strategy allows you to better allocate your resources. And then once you have this value and volatility component, you can slice and dice through business rules at any level of your product and location hierarchy. So here we are only focusing on products. So I may say that, okay, I'm an apparel and footwear manufacturer. All my AX is 97% except women, gender women, right? Women is 99 because they are more picky, patient, whatever the reason. So I can provide AX 97 for everything except gender women, where it is 99. At the same time, I can have a C product that is strategic for me. It doesn't sell very well, but it helps in selling other things, right? So I may have all my CX at 95, but a CX strategic, I want it to be 97. So kind of strategies. The problem that we see on our customer side is most of the time supply chains and business teams on the customer side, they don't find time to have these kind of discussions, and then it's like a vicious cycle where supply chain is basically explaining why we don't have inventory on the best lines or top lines, or why we have too much inventory on long tail. So we basically keep running in circles. Whereas if you take this time to discuss with the business and come up with this strategy together, it is a lot more beneficial in the end for both your service levels and for your costs.
Thanks, very good point. I want to do one more example, and that one's for you, Thomas. So if we look at, for example, replenishment frequency, what are important considerations when designing a replenishment frequency to either branch, store, hub level? How would you approach this exercise?
Yeah. So it's a couple of different elements that I would consider. First, obviously, there's the warehousing components, right? Is there space readily available, to hold a particular amount of stock to meet that certain level of service, right? If you can't maintain, 4 weeks of supply in your AX category because you have storage considerations, then that's an element that you need to consider. Also, the cost of holding this inventory to meet this particular level of service which you're looking to deliver to your customers. All these things need to be taken into consideration: the cost of holding this inventory, and also the cost of ordering this inventory as well, right? So depending on the resource you have allocated to replenish this particular stock, that will also dictate what's the actual appropriate replenishment frequency in which you look to deploy. It's something else that I want to go back to, actually, something that Sandeep was discussing in the previous example. is actually the volatility segment here, which he's absolutely completely correct. Is that a lot of our customers really, they leave that element of segmentation when they're applying, ABC differentiation. And something else here I also want to elaborate on as well is you can see there is a lot of different layers and differentiation layers that can be adopted. But for those on the call that are looking to really adopt this concept and embrace this concept of segmentation, is really, you can have one layer of segmentation, 2, 3, 4, right? You don't need to have a huge number of segmentation, right? But really, the more levels of segmentation you provide, you will actually realize the more benefits and value add results you will see from the bottom line. So I just wanted to reiterate that point as well, because I know all these considerations when we're trying to segment. But hey, wait, if we're just starting and embracing this concept, where do we start? We don't need to have all these layers of segmentation. Let's start from a foundational level, embrace the idea high level, and do top down, and then you'll really sort of embrace the concept of segmentation. So that's something I wanted to kind of go over. And I guess if we go to the next slide. Yeah, Danny, sorry, I kind of went to.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, and again, yeah, just in terms of replenishment frequency, again, the elements that I described, obviously there's a warehousing component, and also the resources that you have available to deliver this replenishment frequency, or to order at this particular frequency. So those are sort of the elements that I would actually consider when applying this segmentation strategy from a replenishment perspective.
Thanks. We have about 3 minutes left, so I want to go and wrap up with a conclusion. So we talked about the end goal of segmentation, we talked about the need for segmentation, we talked about all the different criteria and different segmentations that exist, and we see that there's a lot of them. So we kind of like, if we go back to the very first slide, the service, working capital, cost, or the supply chain triangle, as you had put it earlier, Sandeep. Can you reiterate, like, how does segmentation actually, then improve that bottom line? What is that end goal, and how does it achieve that?
In the beginning, we discussed the value add of segmentation, whether it is supplier, product, channel, market, customer, right? But in the end, the purpose of any segmentation is basically how do you balance these three sides of the triangle. What service I want to provide, at what cost, and what inventory I need to carry to provide that service level, right? So if we simplify a little bit, service, as I said, means availability, and availability generally is a prerequisite for your top line. And then if the availability is at the right place in your network, this means you will not have to spend extra money to move it around. You will not have to do any kind of network balancing or internal transfers or store-to-store transfers, which means you will have at least a little bit of handle on your cost. And when you, again, if we simplify, when you subtract cost from your revenue, it's basically your EBIT, right? And if you have right levels of inventory, which means your product mix is right and the inventory is at right location, this means you have less cash stuck in your inventory. So it is low level of inventory, which is providing you with high level of availability. And EBIT minus your working capital is nothing but return on capital employed, right? So basically what we are trying to say here is that segmentation does not only help you improve your availability, inventory, and cost metrics, but it also helps you with your financial performance, where it is directly linked with how you're performing at your EBIT and return on capital employed metrics.
Thank you. We're at the end of the hour, but I want to give the last 2 two closing cents to Thomas. So this is high level as a company. What are the benefits? But maybe if we look at the benefits for actual planners that are working with a segmented supply chain. What do you consider to be their main benefits?
Yeah, sure. So from a demand planning perspective, really, it's really streamlining and prioritizing where you need to spend your time planning. We have a lot of customers which there isn't enough time during the day to plan each and every item within their product assortment. So really applying this concept of segmentation will really highlight where you can really trust your statistical forecast. So you actually can just put that aside, and where you can actually enrich your forecast, when you have a high level of volatility, or if there's a strategic account or something like that. So it really helps streamline your day-to-day and really allocates and frees up more time to spend really enriching your forecast where those value add portions of your assortment really warrant the attention. So it really helps save time, but also at the same time, you're saving time and you're providing more value. So it's really twofold from a demand planning perspective.
Thanks, Thomas. This was the end of our panel discussion. I'd like to thank both Sandeep and Thomas for taking their time and spend it with us. If anyone has any questions afterwards, we'll reach out to you with a copy of the slide deck, and feel free to connect with us on either LinkedIn, shoot us an email, or anything. Thanks everyone for joining today, and hope to see you all in the future. And again, thanks Sandeep and Thomas for taking your time to be here with me. Take care, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you all. It was my pleasure, and have a wonderful day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.